Come a little closer, find out if you're way too old for this Corvette. Even if you're in your early 20s, the Corvette C4 was one of the most successful Corvettes that has ever been made. Now, you wouldn't know that by the publicity that this Corvette is getting lately. Read most of the publications, watch the YouTube videos, and jump into the forums, and you're gonna see exactly what I mean. The Corvette C4 is somehow labeled as the dark ages of the Corvette's lineup, and that's completely ridiculous. But first, don't forget to do all the YouTubey stuff. Like, share, and subscribe. Let's go. Look at this comparison test. I completely remember this because I had a copy of this magazine back in the day. And these few editors placed the Corvette C4 in 4th place versus its competition. So its competition must be better, right? Hold on just a second. These were times where a low level of NVH took priority over a sports car feel. Look no further than the Toyota that got 1st place. The Supra is a great car when it's boosted. Nice. But when it's stock, it's very drama-free, as pointed out here. Now, reading this magazine, it was very confusing to me at the time because the logical brain would tell you if these other sports cars were better, they would sell more, right? Well, I remember at the time, there were brand new Corvette C4s all over Miami, in every single corner. They were selling like hotcakes. Its competitors, not so much. And the reason is pretty obvious. So the editors in this magazine voted the C4 4th place. Everybody else in the country voted the Corvette C4 1st place, and they voted with their hard-earned money. It was such an annihilation of his competition that every single one of these competitors was cancelled. Moral of this story, don't compare the Corvette C4 with the wrong cars. It is a toy that you can do daily driving duties with, but that's not what it's for. The Corvette C4 is to have fun. There really shouldn't be any other considerations. The Corvette C4 came with several different 5.7 liter V8s. When it first came out, it came with the Crossfire. Now, the Crossfire has gotten a lot of bad rap, but with a simple tune, you can actually extract a lot more from that Crossfire 5.7. Later came the L98. There's an immediate shove in the back just driving that car around. So if you have a passenger, they're bobbing back and forth just because the shove is at every single throttle. And that adds to the enjoyment, at least in my book. Then came out the ZR1. This is a supercar motor. It was very niche for a Corvette, but with this engine, the Corvette C4 competed with a Porsches, and in many cases, it won. Later came the LT1. That engine is a rever compared to the L98. And a lot of people say that this engine is the reason that the Corvette ZR1 didn't sell more. Something tells me they didn't drive it though. And then the LT1 turned into the LT4, which basically is a tuned LT1. These only came with a manual transmission, and these are the most collectible Corvette C4s that you can possibly find. You can service this engine at almost any dealership or any shop anywhere in the United States. And that in itself removes such a level of stress from owning a classic sports car that it adds to the enjoyment. Whatever Corvette you purchase is easily serviceable anywhere. It's part of the reason why this car is so popular. The Corvette ZR1 is a much better Corvette than you can imagine. You see this road test. The initial numbers will lead you to believe that the 911 Turbo is faster. The 5-mile-an-hour rolling start, the ZR1 is much faster. And if they had tested it at 20 miles an hour, the gap would have been even bigger. The Corvette's ZR1 numbers are limited by its long gearing and its ability to launch. If the ZR1 had proper gearing that's not catered to fuel economy, it would be an even bigger gap in performance. The only reason that it didn't sell in the numbers that it should have sold is because Chevrolet dropped the ball with its marketing department. You see these cars? One is 3 inches wider than the other one. You can barely tell in pictures and in person. In today's world, flares will be added, wings will be added, and you'll be able to tell that that is the ZR1. Back in the 1990s, it was all hidden. So you see those extra 3 inches in the rear. It wasn't just the back bumper. The Corvette C4 started getting wider all the way back from the front of the doors until it finally extended into the rear bumper, which was 3 inches wider. And that was done to pack 315s in the rear. Not pack, actually. Hide 315s in the rear. And all that firepower was hidden in a shell that looked exactly like a car that was almost half its price. Not good. That's why the ZR1 is the performance bargain of the century. Now how this engine sends its power down to the wheels is a different story. Most Corvette C4s are automatic, and there's a reason for this. There is so much low-end torque that you really don't have to rev it to get the car exploding down the line. So the automatic was the obvious choice. Some options are very controversial today, but they weren't back then, and that's where the manual comes in. The Corvette C4 came with two different manual transmissions, the Doug Nash manual and the CF 6-speed. Now look anywhere online and the first thing that you're gonna see is that everybody bashes the earlier manual transmissions, the Doug Nash model, and everybody praises the ZF 6-speed, almost as if they're worlds apart, and they are not. The ZF 6-speed is a 4-speed with 2 overdrives, so you get to play mainly with 4 speeds. The Doug Nash transmission, it's also a 4-speed.
It's a Chevrolet exclusive and one of the most sophisticated gearboxes in the world, and a unique overdrive gear set.
It's a weird concept and it does get a lot of bad press, but what it doesn't get is the good press that it deserves. Like for example, it's a lot easier to find parts for this Borg-Warner transmission than the later CF 6-speed. That main 4-speed transmission is just less expensive to rebuild, and it easily takes 500 foot-pounds of torque, so the bad press that the Super 10 receives is completely unwarranted. It's a great transmission, and the ZF 6-speed, the very same transmission, is used in the Corvette ZR1. So let's jump into what you actually need to watch out for when you're looking to get another toy for your collection. When you first start looking at Corvette C4s, when you're rolling through the auctions, the listings, the issue is not the price. The issue is finding a nice one. Since there's so many of them for sale, it's very difficult to tell right off the bat which ones have been taken care of or which ones are beaters. Some things are pretty obvious, like for example the paint, and you see the leather, the dashboard's cracked, but some other things are not as obvious. For example, the weather stripping. Why the weather stripping? Well, because the weather stripping on a Corvette C4 disintegrates when it's left outside in the elements. And what a lot of people do is that they replace all the weather stripping on Corvette C4s with aftermarket units instead of brand new OEM weather stripping. So you might have a car that looks actually really good, but the weather stripping is brand new, but it's not OEM. This alone causes so much trouble with C4 Corvettes. The windows not going up, the hatch that refuses to close because there's a huge one around the back, and the squeaks that they cause. You almost have to drive around with earplugs. You can't tell that from a picture. The OptiSpark, for example, if the Corvette C4 has over 60,000 miles, it needs to be changed, regardless if it's working or if it's not working. And if it has been changed, was it changed with the updated vented unit? There really is no excuse to put the original non-vented back in. And so a set of records will reveal exactly what's been done to any particular Corvette. So always look for pristine examples of the Corvette C4 and skip the projects, because on a paint job alone, you could spend $3,000 or $4,000 just to get a half decent paint job. There's a lot of these Corvettes all over the United States that are taken out on weekends and put right back. Those are the kind of Corvette C4s that you want, that everybody wants. The thing is that they might actually look the same in pictures, so really dig into the owners to see if it's the real deal. And if it's the real deal, it's worth the bucks. It always will be, because this Corvette is so good. The Corvette C4's interior is interesting to say the least. You had two major interiors and a revision of the second one. The first could be called the 80s Star Wars style, and the later ones could be called the jet fighter style. Now, some things are really obvious to tell if they're bad. So for example, the instrument clusters, they can cost a lot to fix relative to the price of the car. But there are some other things that are not as obvious. For example, the glass Targa tops. Why? Because the glass Targa tops are not glass, they're acrylic. And when you put acrylic in the sun, year after year, you're going to get a lot of little spider cracks, and it completely detracts from the feel of the car. And this acrylic top you really can't fix. You have to get another one. This is $1,000 right there. So a lot of C4s come with two tops. If one of them is the acrylic top and it looks like this, it basically just has one top. Another thing that could jump out is the upholstery and the seats. Believe it or not, the aftermarket upholstery that they sell for Corvette C4s in many cases looks better than factory. And a lot of these Corvette C4s have been done because these are really simple seats to redo. So it's difficult to tell in pictures which Corvette C4 is uber nice. But there is one thing, the radio. If any Corvette C4 still has its original radio, that tells me 80% of what I need to know about that car, especially if the owner has all the records. That car is going to be priced at the higher end, and it's worth it. Now, as far as collectability, a way to see it is, can you play with it and know that in a couple years you'll get your money back or more, which in a big way adds to the fun, at least for me. The Grand Sports with red interiors, the Callaways, and the all-white 88th anniversary edition are the ones to get for collector value, and it's pretty obvious to tell why. The Grand Sport looks like a Hot Wheels toy, and let's get real, this is what this is. This is a Hot Wheels car, and that's a Hot Wheels car in real life. Few cars can pull off those stripes. This is a car that you keep in your showroom and you take it to car shows, enjoy on the weekends, and put back. The Callaway is completely over the top nutty, and they have crazy interiors to match. It's another toy, and the 88th anniversary edition is capturing that 1980s Miami Vice vibe almost as good as a Testarossa is. It needs nothing. Every single experience that I've had with a Corvette C4 has been unbelievable. First time I got in a Corvette C4 was a convertible 1991, and I was 13 years old. My aunt let me borrow that car, and I drove it straight into a ditch, and it was epic. When I was 13, I was thinking about only having fun. I turned 15, 16, same thing. I was not thinking about the plastics of the interior, the ride quality of the car. Those things weren't even in my radar. I just wanted to have fun in a cool car. But as I got older, I started to notice panel gaps, leather quality, if there's orange peel in the paint, the depth of engineering in cars, how much it costs versus how much I could actually sell it for eventually. I started to notice all the things that an old man looks at. And while those things are good, it's important to never forget the 16-year-old that you still have inside. And that 16-year-old you couldn't care less about panel gaps. That 16-year-old just wants to have fun. And the people that you see driving these cars, they haven't forgotten what really matters. And it's not the quality of the plastics. So are you too old for the Corvette C4? If not, you will enjoy it. It's about fun and nothing else. The Corvette C4 is for those that are young at heart. You just have to remember that when you go drive the C4, you've got to take off your old man hat and put on your young man hat.